You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Eli Groner, who's Israel's Minister for Economic Affairs to the United States. He's based in Washington, D.C. He became a diplomat by way of the private sector, where he worked most recently in private equity and management consulting. Eli, pleasure to have you.
Good to be here, Doug.
Before we begin talking about how you got there, could you just tell us what does Israel's Minister for Foreign Affairs to the United States actually do?
Well, it's economic affairs as opposed to foreign affairs. But in terms of economic affairs, basically the finance ministry's representative for any and all government-to-government or government-to-business economic relationships between Israel and the United States. Israel and the United States have a fairly unique economic relationship which manifests itself with the security assistance, with the loan guarantees, with a number of bilateral funds, and there's all sorts of other finance-related issues between the two countries, and I'm basically Israel's representative on the ground in the United States to ensure that that goes smoothly.
So is this like a Chamber of Commerce representative or a head?
No, I think the Chamber of Commerce is more commerce-focused, and this is more government-focused. The security assistance, which is projected to be over $3 billion this year, is something that everyone knows that the U.S. provides it to Israel, but there's a lot of sort of legislative work behind the scenes that needs to get done to ensure that that happens. The loan guarantees have been pretty consuming for the last number of weeks. We're looking to extend them. They've recently expired after 7 years. These are basically commitments by the U.S. to guarantee loans that Israel will issue in times of need. So there's a number of ongoing macroeconomic issues between the governments, which I'm tasked with overseeing.
I suppose that after the downgrade of the U.S. debt, pretty soon those loan guarantees are going to go the other way?
You said it, not me. I will say this, in defense of the U.S., after the downgrade, the interest rates on U.S. government bonds actually went down. So right. The market wasn't buying that the U.S. is not still the safest, most reliable source of funding.
I guess the market was not as impressed with the rating agencies, many of whom had said that top-rated paper was going to be fine before it went crashing and burning a few years ago.
Well, I don't want to diminish the importance of the rating agencies. We take those ratings agencies quite seriously, but yes, the market speaks more powerfully than the rating agencies do.
Right, and they're certainly not profits. I also just want to note that a lot of people talk about the $3 billion in assistance that she spoke about, but on the other hand, there's a lot of discussion about how much America gets back for investing that money with Israel.
Oh, absolutely, and I was very specific when I used the term assistance as opposed to aid. I don't like the terminology of aid. People talk about it as if it's a one-way relationship, which is far from the case. I mean, there's a number of benefits that the U.S. gets from Israel. Again, it may or may not get them because of the aid, but it's a complete two-way partnership, which both sides provide what they're able to provide.
Mm-hmm. We actually had a very strong advocate for that position on the Goldstein on Gelt show here. I spoke to Professor Alan Dershowitz about that, and I mentioned it, and he just didn't stop about how important that relationship was for the United States. In fact, if you missed it, Eli, or any of the other listeners missed it, they can get the download of the podcast at goldsteinongelt.com. Let me move on a little bit about one of the interesting things that you've done, which as an American sounds very strange, which is in order to take this job, you had to, in fact, revoke your U.S. citizenship. Many people find that earth-shattering. Could you explain why you had to do that?
Well, the why is really just a technicality. One cannot serve as a foreign diplomat on U.S. soil and retain U.S. citizenship. So from a cold, objective perspective, this is perfectly reasonable. On a personal level, it was much more emotionally charged than I expected it to be. I have to say, throughout the entire application and interview recruitment process, and it was a long process to get this position. It took a number of months. I was repeatedly told that if I were to take this position, it would require me to give up my citizenship. And it wasn't at all surprised from the first meeting to the last meeting. Yet, when the time finally came to reach out to the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv and actually vocalize that I wanted to revoke my U.S. citizenship, it became quite painful. I understand that throughout the process, I'm being told, you understand that in order to take this position, you have to give up your U.S. citizenship. And I always said yes, yes, yes. But for whatever reason, psychologically, there's a difference between saying yes, I understand, and yes, I'm willing, to actually reaching out to the embassy and saying I would like to revoke, the term they use is renunciate, my U.S. citizenship. Now, giving up one's citizenship is not something that any country wants to see. So the U.S. officials were, I have to say, very, very understanding given the circumstances. But it was still quite uncomfortable from a personal perspective. And when I finished with the preliminary paperwork and scheduled my appointment where I had to sign off on what I was doing, they call it an interview process, they told me that if I had anything to say at the time of the interview, I should prepare a statement which would go into my file. And that was when I drafted the statement that eventually got published.
Yeah, that was quite an amazing statement. We are talking to Eli Groner, who is representing Israel now in the United States as the Minister for Economic Affairs, and we were discussing for a minute about giving up his U.S. citizenship. It's actually become a hot topic here among people who have moved to Israel. They've made Aliyah. They've decided to completely move their center of life, and some of them who've done it 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago are still finding themselves caught in the U.S. tax net. And yet they say, I have no connection to the United States anymore, but I'm still required to pay into it. As someone who's now given up his citizenship, does that change the way you look at this now?
No, it doesn't really change the way I look at it. And I'm not sure what you mean by they have to pay into it. Any U.S. citizen, as I was up until a couple of months ago, is required by U.S. law to fill out tax returns every year. But other than paying your accountants for that service, if you don't do it yourself, there's no other taxes that the U.S. requires that you pay, if I'm not mistaken. Am I wrong on that?
Well, let's say I'm not a tax advisor. I'm a regular old financial planner. But let's say that someone has a large estate and would have to pay estate taxes, or people who've never, even children of people who are Americans who moved to Israel. It's just an interesting relationship that you note that Americans feel very, very strongly about keeping their citizenship. So I hear, and I also read what you had written, which was really quite moving. It's really very difficult.
Yeah. It was much more difficult than anticipated. In fact, when I walked out of the embassy, for those that are familiar with it, it's on the beach in Tel Aviv on Yarkon Street. And after I walked out of there, I literally had to exhale and just went to the beach for an hour. I mean, I was fully clothed and I didn't actually walk on the sand, but I was standing overlooking the water, just looking out and thinking, "Wow, what have I done?" It was very, very. I don't want to say unsettling, but it was very emotional. It was very much more so than I anticipated.
Very interesting.
But again, I'm not the first person to do this. It's been done by others before me, and I can't speak to what their experiences were, but I'm sure that it was somewhat similar.
So let's talk about how you got to this position in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Your background, I think I know you originally as a journalist, and then you worked on Wall Street, and you worked with McKinsey as a consultant. How did these experiences prepare you for the work that you're doing now? So
again, everyone comes to this position with a different set of experiences and a different sort of outlook as to what he or she would like to get done and would like to accomplish beyond sort of the standard things that need to be done as job requirements regarding any sort of established formal issues between Israel and the United States regarding loan guarantees, regarding security assistance, etc. My perspective, which was private sector, management consulting, private equity, investment banking, basically encourages me to look for all sorts of private-public partnerships. I do recognize the strong value and the relative efficiency of the private sector. I also think that the public sector has a lot to offer in terms of facilitating or diverting certain types of investment and certain types of business activity that are beneficial to the economy at large. So finding that right balance between what the private sector and the public sector can do together is something that I think I have a good perspective on and a couple of ideas on what I'd like to do as well.
Okay, in the last minute or two, where do you think the future economic relationship between Israel and the U.S. is heading, especially in light of the fact that certainly a lot of people here have felt in the past year or two that the U.S. government has perhaps given us a bit of the cold shoulder, having turned its favor towards other countries?
I have to say that I can't identify with the statement that the U.S. is giving us an economic cold shoulder. The numbers show that the assistance that Israel has received from the United States has never been greater in terms of financial assistance. And I've seen nothing in Congress to suggest that directionally that will be otherwise. In fact, from my meetings on the Hill and with various Congress folks, the impression I get is that they're more committed than ever to strengthen those economic ties.
Okay, so then we will look forward to a continuing good relationship, and hopefully your being there is going to continue to help that along.
I'll do my best.
All right, Eli Groner, in the last few seconds, how could people just follow what you're doing there so they see what in fact the Israel ministry is involved in?
Well, the first thing I'd say is anybody that's interested in following what I'm doing probably needs to get a more interesting life on their own side. But what I'm doing is not it's not something that you would follow Eli Groner in the newspapers or whatnot. It's basically, if you follow what's going on with the loan guarantees, you follow what we're trying to do on sort of renewable energy investments in Israel, if you look at what's going on in the security assistance, any macroeconomic government-to-government economic cooperation is probably going through my office. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not me by myself. It's in conjunction with a lot of very talented, very committed people in the finance ministry, in the prime minister's office, in Congress. Hopefully, you'll hear good things.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. I think that Israel is very lucky to have you on the team. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much for talking to us today.
Pleasure, Doug.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.